grand geographic tour of a place that, well, might be a tiny package, but it seriously packs a massive global punch. We're talking about Europe. I mean, despite its much smaller size compared to other landmasses, its history and culture have literally shaped the world. So, here's a fascinating question to get us going. How exactly does the world's second smallest continent, a landmass that's roughly 3 times the size of India, manage to squeeze in such incredibly varied landforms, climates, and cultures? From frozen tundras up north to sun-drenched Mediterranean beaches down south, it's all packed into one remarkably tight space. Here's our flight plan for today. We'll be covering 4 main stops. 1. Location and extent. 2. Physical divisions. 3. River systems. And finally, 4. Climate and vegetation. All right, let's jump right into section 1, location and extent. Okay, let's dive into this. Europe is famously known as the Peninsula of Peninsulas. Now, as a quick refresher, a peninsula is just a piece of land surrounded by water on 3 sides. And Europe itself acts like this giant peninsula jutting westward out from Asia. It's bound by the Arctic Ocean up north, the Atlantic to the west, and the Mediterranean Sea down south. Because the sea cuts so deeply into the land, it creates this incredibly irregular coastline full of smaller peninsulas. Think the Scandinavian, Iberian, Italian, and Greek peninsulas. It's actually this exact unique geography that made Europe such a historical powerhouse for maritime trade and exploration. To put the sheer scale into perspective, we're looking at 10 million square kilometers. And what's truly mind-blowing is that within that 10 million square kilometers, you've got 50 distinct countries. It's a continent of extreme contrasts in scale. You have the massive transcontinental nation of Russia on one end, all the way down to the tiny independent enclave of Vatican City, which, fun fact, actually holds the record for having the largest church in the entire world. Moving on to section 2, 4 epic physical divisions. We're going to break the continent's topography down into 4 epic layers: the Northwestern Highlands, the North European Plains, the Central Uplands, and the Alpine Mountain System. Having this quick roadmap in your head makes it so much easier to visualize how the actual ground changes as we travel from north to south. Starting way up in the north, we hit the ancient, highly eroded Northwestern Highlands. These stretch from Finland and Sweden right on down through Scotland, and they are some of the absolute oldest mountains in all of Europe. A super defining feature you'll find here are the fjords. During the last ice age, massive glaciers carved deep, steep-sided valleys right into the coast. Then, when that ice eventually melted, seawater rushed in. This created these spectacular, deep saltwater inlets that heavily indent the coastline, especially in places like Norway. As we move southwards, the landscape flattens out pretty dramatically into the North European plains. Picture this: vast stretch of low, gently rolling land sweeping all the way from the Ural Mountains in the east right to the Atlantic coast in the west. Thanks to the rich alluvial soils left behind by major rivers, this is hands down one of the most fertile regions on the entire continent. It's heavily used for agriculture and supports some really dense populations. Right on the southern border of these plains, you'll find the Central Uplands. These are older forested plateaus and hills, like Germany's famous Black Forest or the Meseta in Spain. They're packed with minerals, but they aren't quite as towering as our next division. And a perfect example of what happens when we hit the extreme south is the Alpine Mountain System. These are young, towering fold mountains packed with high peaks and deep valleys. While the Alps form the core of this system, it branches out significantly. In fact, over in the Caucasus Mountains, which act as the natural border separating Europe and Asia, stands Mount Elbrus. It's a dormant volcano and proudly holds the title of the absolute highest peak on the European continent. No way you'd want to climb that without some serious gear. Which brings us perfectly to section 3, Europe's flowing river lifelines. Now, how a European river behaves depends entirely on where it's located. In Western Europe, thanks to a really nice, even distribution of rainfall, the rivers carry enough water to run year-round. That makes them incredible, bustling avenues for continuous trade and transportation. But if we shift our focus to Eastern Europe, well, the harsh, long winters mean a lot of these major rivers literally freeze solid. As you can imagine, that severely limits inland navigation during those colder months. Let's run through some of the heavy hitters. The Volga easily takes the crown as the longest river in Europe, flowing entirely through Russia before draining into the Caspian Sea. Then you have the Danube, which is totally unique because it's the only major east-flowing river in Europe. It touches or crosses numerous countries before eventually reaching the Black Sea. And of course, there's the Rhine, which is absolutely the busiest waterway in Europe, flowing up into the North Sea. These rivers aren't just there for moving boats around either. They act as absolutely vital natural borders. For instance, the Dnieper River forms a natural boundary between Belarus and Ukraine. But it's not all flowing rivers. Europe is literally dotted with hundreds of thousands of lakes, mostly left over from glacial action during the Ice Age. To give you an idea, Finland alone has so many that it's universally known as the land of 1,000 lakes. But the most fascinating water body of the bunch has to be the Caspian Sea. It sits at Europe's lowest point, and despite its name, it is technically an enormous, completely enclosed inland lake. Because of incredibly high evaporation rates in that area, its waters are highly, highly salty. All right, moving on to our final pillar, Section 4, Climate and Natural Vegetation. So why exactly does a continent located this far north enjoy such a surprisingly moderate climate? Well, the answer lies in a bit of geographic magic, relying on three key modifiers. First up is its latitudinal factor, specifically that peninsula shape we talked about earlier. It means the moderating influence of the sea reaches deep inland. Second is the North Atlantic Drift. This is a warm ocean current flowing along the western coast that literally cranks up the temperature and keeps harbors ice-free even in the dead of winter. And third, you have the westerly winds. These blow over that warm ocean current, pick up moisture, and bring consistent, necessary rainfall year-round to the western coasts. Now, what's really interesting here is how local weather directly dictates the plant life across 5 distinct zones. Over in the west, the maritime climate brings wet, mild weather that perfectly supports mixed deciduous trees like oak and ash. Move inland to the continental zone, and the drop in rain creates these vast grassy plains we call steppes. Head down south, and the hot, dry summers of the Mediterranean climate are just perfect for evergreens like olives and citrus. Up north, the cold temperate zone hosts incredibly thick coniferous forest of pine and spruce, yielding super valuable softwoods. And finally, at the extreme north, the freezing tundra is essentially a cold desert. We're talking bitterly cold conditions where really only the hardiest mosses and lichens can even survive. But here is an incredibly unique feature that locks all these climates into place: the orientation of the mountains. Unlike the Americas, major European mountain chains like the Alps and the Caucasus run from east to west. This is absolutely huge because they act as giant natural wind barriers. They stop the warm, moist winds from the south from reaching the north, and they block those freezing Arctic winds from sweeping down into the Mediterranean. They fundamentally shape and protect these distinct regional climates. As we wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought. We've seen how Europe's entire geographic identity, its moderate weather, its ice-free ports, its booming agriculture, is delicately, almost perfectly balanced on ocean currents, prevailing winds, and that vast, irregular coastline. So, given this profound reliance on the current state of nature, how will the peninsula of peninsulas adapt as our global climate rapidly changes? It's a question that directly bridges the historical geography we've explored today straight into the continent's future. Keep exploring, and thanks for joining us on this incredible grand tour.